Welcome to Bunny Trails, a whimsical adventure of idioms and other turns of phrase. I'm Dan Pugh.
And I'm Shauna Harrison. Each week, we take an idiom or other turn of phrase and try to tell the story from its entry into the English language to how it's used today. I have a friend who just doesn't fit in with the rest of her family. She occasionally feels she's disappointing her parents by not following the typical path in her life. She calls herself the black sheep of the family.
I have long wondered about where this comes from, the black sheep. All right, I'm excited to hear about the history of this phrase.
All right. Well, the phrase black sheep or black sheep of the family means that a person is an outcast, that they've been rejected, they're an embarrassment, or is simply different in some way. If we think about this in the context of Western culture, sheep were typically white and a black sheep would stand out. It would be considered unusual or different. That gives a visual metaphor to the concept of a person who stands out.
Okay, that makes me feel better. That makes sense, yeah. I mean, from a Western culture, and it is a Western phrase because English is mostly a Western language.
Yep. According to Oxford English Dictionary, black sheep is, quote, a disreputable or unsatisfactory member of a family, etc., a bad character. Frequently in the black sheep of the family, also flock, end quote.
The black sheep of the flock sounds weird because now you're mixing, is it a flock of sheep?
Yes.
It is a flock of sheep?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then it's less weird then because I
Okay.
was thinking chickens are flocks, birds are flocks, right? Sheep must be, but then I got that far and was like, wait, I don't know what sheep are.
It is.
Are
It's
sheep
a
a
flock
flock?
of sheep.
Why? I genuinely think that there is some governing body over what we call groups of animals, and they change it every 10 years to keep everybody on their toes.
Oh, yeah.
And they always pick the most ridiculous things, like a congress of baboons or something like that.
Yeah, so if we were to really, my goodness. If
A
we
murder of crows,
murder of crows,
Yeah, no, seriously. But I'm just like, they're making this stuff up, and I think they change it all the
it's
time.
those, like, scientists, they get mad at whatever animal, like, wronged them, and so they give it a horrible name.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Black sheep, the animals, show up in print to a limited degree prior to the figurative use of the phrase, but not a lot here. One prominent example is a mention in Pliny the Elder's work, The Natural History of the World, the second tome. This example comes from the English translation by Philemon Holland from 1634. In this work, Pliny describes the cure or treatment for a type of fever-related illness. Quote, the crocodile's heart wrapped within a lock of wool, which grew upon a black sheep, and hath no other color, medled therewith, so that the said sheep were the first lamb that the dam yeaned, is said to drive away quarantine agues, end quote.
Right.
Okay, so...
Uh-huh. Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. By the time that you gathered a crocodile's heart and then a black sheep that was the first lamb, then by the time you got all of that, whatever quarantine agues was, probably it worked its course and you were either dead from it or you were on your way getting better anyway.
All right. So I once read a review of Pliny's Natural History that described the work as one of uneven accuracy.
That might be the understatement of the millennia.
Exactly. And this excerpt really pulls that in well. This odd idea that rare or mysterious creatures carry unique healing components is one that persists today. However, rarity or unusualness are not determining factors of an animal's usefulness in medical treatments, just so everybody's clear.
Yeah, that's fair. If you want to hear more about Pliny the Elder and his wild medical stuff, I recommend the podcast Sawbones, which is a medical tour of misguided medicine. No, it's a marital tour because it's a family physician and her comedian husband that hosts that show. And yeah,
pretty
so
entertaining.
It is entertaining. It's a weekly show. They've got 300-400 episodes or something. But anyway, yeah, it's a really interesting look at it. But the fact that there's a medical physician that's actually on the show and she gets to bring credibility to all of these old-timey stuff, and they talk about Pliny the Elder quite a bit because of his uneven accuracy.
That work does tell us the category in which a black sheep was placed at the time. They were considered something unusual or even exotic. Oxford English Dictionary has the figurative usage of black sheep appearing in print in 1640. In reference to a person, this is the earliest attestation I was able to confirm. The phrase is used to its fullest extent in The Sincere Convert by Thomas Shepard, published 1640. Quote, cast out all the profane people among us as drunkards, swearers, whores, liars, which the scripture brands for black sheep and condemns them in 100 places, end quote.
I mean,
it's very
if you don't want
intense.
people to be sinners, you have to stop making being a sinner sound so cool.
It's almost the gypsy song.
Drunkards,
Oh,
swearers, whores, liars. And I'm like, I mean,
probably a fun group.
I'd like to be 3 of those 4 things. I'll let you decide which ones those are.
Oh, gosh. Okay. There are some who may claim that the term black sheep comes from the Bible. However, there are not an overwhelming number of direct references to black sheep in the Bible. Some recent versions of the Bible have used the term in rewritings, but the term was not used much in the original texts. There's one story in which Jacob works to make a deal with his father-in-law. He says that he will go through the flock and take any speckled and spotted sheep and black lambs, and the same of the goats to serve as his wages. This way, his father-in-law could easily review Jacob's flock, and if there were any white sheep, he could consider those to be stolen. Jacob was only using it as part of the agreement he was trying to make, so there wasn't any meaning to it beyond that.
Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense.
There are a number of stories in the Bible with characters that we would classify easily as black sheep. However, the term itself isn't used there. In fact, I had trouble finding texts alluding to black sheep, the animals, being tied to anything overtly negative prior to Thomas Shepard's work.
All right, cool.
So before long, after that, Shepard's work was released, the phrase made it into reference texts, including a collection of English proverbs by John Ray and John Hayes, published in 1670. The work did not provide context for this particular phrase, including only the following for the entry. Quote, to no one from a black sheep, end quote.
Yeah, I know we've mentioned that collection of English proverbs before on the show.
Yeah,
it's pretty. It's good to know that a phrase was in use, but it doesn't always give us much context to like how it was being used or in history, where it was coming from.
Right. I enjoyed the other entries around this one because, as you said, this is a fun collection to look at. We're going to read a few more of those during the bonus, which is available to all of our patrons every Friday at patreon.com/bunnytrailspod. The pattern of to no one from a black sheep, this phrasing was common around this time frame. To know one from something generally meant being able to tell the person was not that type of person.
We talked about somebody said know him from Adam, it was kind of that kind of a thing came up then too.
Similar. This format of the phrase is found in the 1714 work by Alexander Smith and William Davis titled The History of the Lives of the Most Noted Highwaymen, Footpads, Shoplists, and Cheats of Both Sexes.
Now, see, here you go again. Like, if someone called me a highwayman or a footpad or a shoplist, I don't know what most of those are, but I wouldn't be offended by that. So, like, if you don't want people to be things, stop naming it cool things.
Yeah. I also appreciated that this one was of both sexes. They're going to tell you about the female
because men and women can both be cheats and footpads, whatever
exactly.
A footpad is. I don't know. Maybe it's something
but
horribly
I
profane.
I don't know, actually.
I'm afraid it's horribly profane, and like one person who studies the 1700s is listening to this show and is like, oh, every time we say it. Yeah.
These all pretty much sound like thieves, honestly, like just different types of thieves. Quote, these scaring words putting the gentleman into a panic fear, he gave 120 guineas to Whitney, who then, taking his leave of the robbed person, he desired him to acquaint the other gentleman, whenever he saw him, that I was going to say the same to you, would never save his bacon again, for he should know him from a black sheep another time, end quote.
Save as bacon is really cool in here in
Yeah,
1714.
yeah, and yes, this does mean the same as save one's bacon that we use today.
Okay, well that's really cool. Let's put a
Hmm.
little pin in that for a future
Right,
episode.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Like more on
at
this likely
least
in a future
1714.
episode. There's a popular children's song that mentions black sheep. The online etymology dictionary gives us a little info about the song along with a comment on the phrase. Quote, one black sheep in a flock is said to be considered good luck by shepherds in Sussex, Somerset, Kent, and Derbyshire. The first known publication of Baba Black Sheep nursery rhyme is in Tommy Thumb's Pretty Songbook, circa 1744. End quote.
That's interesting. That's the Baba Black Sheep Heavy Any Wool. Yes, sir. 3 bags full.
Yep.
Okay.
And they have it listed based on Google Ngrams that black sheep being used in that figurative sense really started to become popular in 1776 in writings. Obviously, we found references prior to that, but that's when it showed up enough to be counted.
Interesting.
A new dictionary, English and French and English, by Louis Chambord and J.B. Robinette, published in 1776, included the term black sheep along with another phrase. Quote, il est marqué. No. Quote, il est marqué. He is a black sheep. Il est né marqué. He is marked. He is born with a mark. End quote. It also repeats those. It gives the definition, the additional. He is a black sheep in French, but I read the simpler parts of those that they connect it with. So they are tying in French that someone saying someone's marked or is born with a mark means the same thing as he is a black sheep in English.
Oh, that's cool. Interesting. All right.
This was really interesting to me because it implies something very permanent and inescapable, whereas many of the other references discuss behavior and these kind of character-based judgments that may not necessarily be a permanent status.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, because like the born with a mark thing makes me wonder, is it genetics that cause a sheep to be born with black wool or could two white wooled sheep have a black wooled baby? Like I don't like, is it a genetic, thing, or is it like if you have brown sheep and another brown wooled sheep and they have a baby, do they have brown sheep? Is it like an eye thing where there's a recessive and a dominant trait? I have no idea how sheep work apparently.
Okay.
And the one thing that I can tell you is that if you go up to the sheep and touch it with like a flower or a dye from in Minecraft, it will change color.
It'll change color.
And then when you shear it, it has that color, but you can change it in all of the colors by just putting dye on it again. Even the black sheep, you can dye them to be like whatever, pink or whatever. So that's literally the extent of my knowledge of sheep. And now I literally have no idea why a sheep would have black wool versus white wool.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's like, are they different sheep? Are they different like species of sheep or something?
So they can have, okay, I know that, okay, I don't know, like there are probably different types of sheep maybe that can't breed together, but I do know that like the, basic sheep, I don't know what basic sheep are. I do know that sheep
Basic sheep,
basic sheep.
white ones, the white wooled ones. I don't know.
They can have different colors of wool. So one of the things I read during this research was that this was around in the 1700s and early 1800s that they said to check the mouth of the white sheep, and if they had black spots inside, like on their gums or lips, that would indicate that they could have babies with black wool or with speckled wool. And so that was something to look out for. Now, again, I'm going to say I'm not an expert on sheep rearing, so I don't know.
It would
Beyond
be
that.
husbandry, I think.
Mm-hmm. In the August 1st, 1820 edition of the Edwardsville Spectator out of Edwardsville, Illinois, the phrase is used along with flock. Quote, if Illinois is to be dubbed with the honorable appellation of the black sheep of the flock for this attempt, what is to become of the respectable and populous free states of Ohio and Indiana, which were almost unanimously in favor of it? End quote. So that political article was written with a rather sarcastic air. The phrase also made it to the stage in a show titled The Black Sheep of the Family. Here is the description shared in the November 25th, 1916 edition of the Ogden Standard out of Ogden City, Utah. Quote, a red feature starring Jack Holt and Francelia Billington. Story of a dissipated youth who puts his family and friends down to destruction. End quote. I'm not sure why, but that last bit actually surprised me. It has me wondering if the tale ends with everyone being actually brought to destruction, or if there's some sort of like redemption for the characters, you know?
Yeah, that is interesting because when I think of someone talking about the black sheep of a family now, it's oftentimes more tongue in cheek or more like there's always some sort of a redemption thing to show, or not so much redemption, but a way in which the people who say that's the black sheep come to accept them for who they are because they still have their benefits even though they're not doing what we expected out of them.
Right.
So but I know that is a more modern take on black sheep as opposed to, maybe what they felt in 1916. Who knows?
Well, since Mr. aptly named Thomas Shepard was the one who started this with, them being all of the worst people in the Bible or whatever.
Yeah, I have to be honest with you. Until you just said that, I did not realize it didn't. My brain didn't go
click.
Thomas Shepard with, as far as we can tell, potentially originating black sheep in that way. Yeah, I did. It did not pop into my head.
It's ironic
in that
and
way.
I'm going to need anybody who finds evidence of someone else coming up with it before him to just go ahead and forget about it.
Right.
Over time, the phrase was used to comment on individuals who were almost considered evil, all the way to those who were just the odd one in the family. Today, it's used in varying degrees as well. Although, as Dan, you mentioned, it's oftentimes kind of almost a lighthearted thing. All right, we have several modern uses to cover, and we'll get to those right after we say thank you to our sponsors.
This episode is sponsored by our amazing patrons on Patreon. And the cool thing about Patreon is it is 100% free to join the Bunny Trails community. We have new things every weekday on the feeds. On Mondays, we have a conversation about what movies, shows, books, podcasts, and whatever else everyone is enjoying. Tuesdays see early access to the week's podcast. Wednesdays have all the links, books, songs, and other content mentioned in the week's episode. Thursday has patrons-only polls. And Fridays are our lightly edited, behind-the-scenes video featuring all the cut content, goofs, and bonus facts you could imagine.
We've got some other pretty cool stuff too, like original digital artwork once a month made by me, and direct access to talk with us. No algorithms getting in the way of what we see or don't see. Plus, you can get awesome name recognition like Pat Rowe does every episode. And our top spot is currently occupied by the amazing Mary Halsig Lopez. You can join the Bunny Trails community for free at Bunny Trails Pod on Patreon.
That's patreon.com/bunnytrailspod.
The first modern-ish term is a 1976 translation by Donald Adamson of The Human Comedy by Honoré de Balzac. Adamson's translation was published with the title The Black Sheep. Here's a synopsis from the publisher. Quote, his elegantly crafted tale of sibling rivalry, Honoré de Balzac's The Black Sheep, is translated from the French with an introduction by Donald Adamson in Penguin Classics. Philippe and Joseph Bridau are two extremely different brothers. The elder, Philippe, is a superficially heroic soldier and adored by their mother, Agathe. He is nonetheless a bitter figure, secretly gambling away her savings after a brief but glorious career as Napoleon's aide-de-camp in the Battle of Montreuil. His younger brother, Joseph, meanwhile, is fundamentally virtuous, but their mother is blinded to his kindness by her disapproval of his life as an artist. Foolish and prejudiced, Agathe lives on unaware that she is being cynically manipulated by her own favorite child. But will she ever discover which of her sons is truly the black sheep of the family? A dazzling depiction of the power of money and the cruelty of life in 19th century France, The Black Sheep is a compelling exploration of the nature of deceit. Donald Adamson's translation captures the radical modernity of Balzac's style, while his introduction places The Black Sheep in its context as one of the great novels of Balzac's renowned Comédie humaine. End quote.
Oh, interesting. I like the idea of this, but I think that that's part of the more modern uses of this, where it's oftentimes trying to showcase how the person that they think is the black sheep actually has a lot to offer.
Right. And that was honestly why I kind of classified this in that more modern usage anyway. I feel like this story very much fits with what how we use that phrase today. So all right. And also, this is my other comment on this one. It sounds like it has a lot of drama mixed with like social commentary, which is sort of de Balzac's style, but it sounds like it would be entertaining, I think, to people today too, you know?
Sure.
Black Sheep has been used as the title of a few shows, as we've already found. It was the title given to a Chris Farley and David Spade movie in 1996, which
Right.
may or may not have aged very well.
I saw it in the theater, and I don't think I would see it again.
Okay. That's unbelievable to me that you saw that in the theater. We're actually going to.
Dude, I was a teenager at this time frame, and Chris
Okay,
Farley
yeah.
and David Spade were like the two funniest
They were
people,
so
at the
popular.
time. They were a comedy duo.
So we're actually going to take a look at a movie that came out in 2006. Black Sheep is a 2006 horror comedy. Here's an overview from Rotten Tomatoes. Quote, sheep-fearing Henry returns to his brother's New Zealand farm, hoping his sibling will buy out his share of the property. However, what he finds are genetically altered sheep that prey on humans and turn their victims into undead, woolly killers. Sheer madness ensues as Henry, an animal rights activist, and a farmhand set out to stop the rampaging animals. End quote.
I think sheer madness is a really silly. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
that's a
Yeah,
really silly play
they
on that.
spelled it Shear for
Yeah.
shears and yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
I was like, okay, this is starting okay. You're like genetically altered sheep that prey on humans, and I'm like, wow, and turn their victims into undead woolly killers. I'm like, oh my goodness.
It's absurd. It
Yeah,
sounds.
this seems absurd. Yes.
Uh-huh. I don't think this one's my style. All right, we're going to move on. One of the first items that popped up when searching Black Sheep is the song by Metric featuring Brie Larson. This is from the film Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, which came out in 2021. Here is some info about the show. Quote, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World stars Michael Cera, Mary Elizabeth Winstead, and Kieran Culkin. Sarah's title character, smitten by Ramona Flowers, must battle her 7 evil exes who are out to kill him. Interwoven into the plot is a plethora of fictitious music groups acting out the performances of original compositions by real recording artists. Under the direction of producer Nigel Godrich, Beck provided the music for Scott's lo-fi garage band Sex Bob Omb. Canadian synth rockers Metric did the same for The Clash at Demon Head, which was fronted by Brie Larson, and Broken Social Scene wrote and recorded for Crash and the Boys. In some cases, the finished songs incorporate actual vocal and instrumental contributions from the actors who appeared in the film. The entire process took 2 years of Godrich's life, during which he essentially cast ultimate fantasy bands and got non-musician actors to learn their respective instruments with the aid of Chris Murphy from the band Sloan. The original soundtrack went to number 2 on the Billboard soundtrack chart and includes songs by Frank Black, Beachwood Sparks, Black Lips, T-Rex, Blood Red Shoes, the Rolling Stones, and the Blue Tones. End quote.
Okay, first quick correction. So Scott Pilgrim versus the World came out 2010. So that was I mean still a modern thing, but that movie came out much earlier than that. I don't know about like where the song comes. I know the song was on the soundtrack, but I don't know if the one featuring Brie Larson is a remake of that or what. So
Gotcha. This came from their release of the song, the Metric.
right, so
featuring Brie
they must have
Larson.
done a re-release or done something featuring Brie or something like that. But
Gotcha. Black Sheep is also a song by the rock and roll band Dorothy, which Rolling Stone says we should all get to know. Here are some of the lyrics from the song. Quote, call me an outcast, call me a freak, watch those bullets ricochet straight off of me. 'Cause I belong where right is wrong, no lost cause like the good books say, don't give a damn what people think. I march along to a different song, Woe, I feel it deep in my bones. I was born to break every curse, every chain. So I'm singing, Hail, hail the black sheep. We are blood, we are family. End quote. I like the feel of this song. They've got sort of a like gritty rock sound to them, so it's good.
Mm.
Anyway, there's been a shift in the usage of the phrase in recent years. The following is from an article posted on Psychology Today from August 2023 titled, How to Deal with Being the Black Sheep of the Family. Firm up your boundaries and remember you're not to blame. Quote, key points. The black sheep gets their name from being an outlier from the family unit, the one who is different. While not always the case, the black sheep is often the one who is blamed for any dysfunction. It is easier to blame someone for speaking out than to look at the dysfunction as a whole. End quote. Essentially, the black sheep is identified as the scapegoat in a family system. I'm sure this is true in some situations, and it's good that those who are put into this difficult spot have some advice on dealing with it. But it sounds uncomfortable. There are hundreds of items for sale by creators on Etsy when searching for black sheep. One I liked in particular is a handmade linocut print by P.D. Murray Art. Linocut is a variant of woodcut printing in which a sheet of linoleum is used as the surface for the relief image to be cut into. The printing is made from that. The piece says Black Sheep in bold lettering, and below that is a sheep playing an electric guitar. It's edgy but cute somehow, and I really like it.
That does seem like your style.
Used in a kinder fashion, I think the term black sheep can offer a sort of freedom. I've always felt a little like I didn't quite fit in with everyone else in my family, at school, at work. Accepting and embracing the fact that I'm just different has allowed me to forgive myself for things that are out of my control or just not worth focusing on. Our differences are beautiful. We should all stop worrying about being the black sheep or the speckled sheep and just focus on doing what is helpful and good. That's all we have time for today. If you have any thoughts on the show or pop culture references we should have included, reach out to us on Patreon. That's patreon.com/bunnytrailspod, or come on our website, bunnytrailspod.com.
All right, it's patron poll time. Recently, we asked our patrons which diets they had tried from the list of the top science-backed diets 2024 edition from the U.S. News and World Report. Our listeners responded that they've tried the Mediterranean diet and the flexitarian diet. Here's the definition of those two from the report. Quote, the Mediterranean diet is the #1 best diet overall. It is also a top-rated diet for those looking for a heart-healthy diet, a diabetes-friendly diet, or to promote bone and joint health. But don't confuse Americanized Mediterranean menus, which often feature too much refined pasta, beef, and cheese, with healthy eating. With a flexitarian diet, also known as a semi-vegetarian diet, you don't have to completely eliminate meat to reap the health benefits associated with vegetarianism. Instead, you can be a vegetarian most of the time, but still enjoy a burger or steak on special occasions. End quote. So that's the quick down and dirty description from U.S. News and World Report on those two, which were the ones that were most selected by our patrons. There were some other diets on the list. I can't tell you what they are, but I will list the naming of them, and you can look them up if you so desire. But there's one called the DASH diet. There's one called the MIND, which combines Mediterranean and DASH. There's the Mayo Clinic diet, Weight Watchers, Volumetrics diet, Dr. Will's anti-inflammatory diet. That sounds wild. TLC diet, and vegan diet. Now I've said the word diet so many times it has no meaning.
Yeah. I've been on a few diets, but mostly for like medical reasons, like food allergies and stuff. And I think that gives me a different view of the term anyway, compared with how the word diet's often used. However, I did try the Mediterranean diet, and I really liked that one. The food is delicious, and I felt good. Generally, I think if I'm eating plenty of vegetables and avoiding processed stuff, as well as red meat for the most part, I have more energy and my mind seems a little clearer. I'm assuming that's because it's healthier than eating like candy and banana bread all the time.
Well, I've never really found a special diet that works for me. I do feel better when I avoid foods with extra sugar and heavily processed foods. Beyond that, there are two other factors for me that probably matter the most, I think, with food. So first, my body feels best when I have a big breakfast, a smaller lunch, and an even smaller dinner. I don't know why it works that way, but when I've traveled to places where that was the norm, and there have been times when I've spent 2 or 3 weeks in those places, and so I was on it long enough doing it like that my body kind of got used to it. I my body really seemed to love it. I felt like my joints didn't hurt as bad, and I didn't feel, like as bloated, and everything just worked better, and I felt better. And when I do that at home, I always feel better throughout my day as well. The second thing for me is making meals a social experience. Cooking and eating with people that I like really makes the meal an enjoyable one, and I think that helps with my mental hygiene, which probably is equal parts, body, having a healthy body, but also a healthy soul and healthy mind. So
Yeah.
I suppose the social aspect is actually a big part of what in the Mediterranean and in those cultures. So like that Mediterranean diet is more than just the foods you eat, but also it's a lifestyle piece. And I think that's probably where a lot of people go wrong with diets is they're so focused on just the food aspect of it that they forget that our meals are a lifestyle thing,
Right.
and I'm not saying everyone has to eat with other people at their meals or anything, but like there is a lifestyle that goes to food, and that's I think that's something that we have to recognize as being one part of the puzzle.
Yeah. I People who have some difficulties with food, a lot of times they talk about the relationship with food. So creating a healthy relationship with it. So essentially, like, what are you getting from your food, and so then why are you consuming it or not consuming it, and kind of looking at it that way, so that you have a better idea of what you're putting into your body and why. And so I think that ties into it as well.
Well, as a reminder, our silly polls mean absolutely nothing and are not scientifically valid. And patrons of all levels, including our free tiers, can take part. Head over to patreon.com/bunnytrailspod to take this week's poll. Thanks for joining us. We will talk to you again next week. Until then, remember, words belong to their users.